Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB bikini pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Today we are talking to a lifestyle and prep coach who has done 5 shows and self-coached herself up until last year. And I can't wait to learn more from her and share this experience of learning with all of you as we dive into some really different and interesting and useful topics. So welcome to the show, Gina Scafoglio. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing really great. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. And like I said, I am really excited about everything we've got planned, but I got to ask you, what is something you do or a ritual you have right before your heel hits the stage?
Oh man. So one of my biggest things is just like breathing. So I actually thought that I was gonna be like stage presence was gonna be my strength. And my first show I like totally froze up and I was like shaking on stage and it's continued to be an issue. So there's always somebody on stage that's directing you. And so when they tell me it's my turn, I take in like a really big, long 5-second breath, hold it for a second, let it out, and then I go on.
Wow. Why did you think it was going to be your strength?
I did like cheerleading, ballet, track, like I did a lot of sports growing up, but like I guess with cheerleading and dance, I was a performer, but I never did individual. So that's where it really was a different feeling. I was always on stage with, at least 20 other people. And I was always like a really great performer on that side. But then once I got up on stage by myself for my individual routine, I totally choked up.
Wow. That's great. So what did that look like for you?
Um, like when I was on stage.
Yeah, like when you say you choked up, what happened?
Well, I've been on stage 5 times. Literally all 5 times I've tripped. So
Really?
yeah, I've stumbled, I've like messed up my routine. I'm to the point where like my whole body's like trembling.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
so wild. Has you gotten
Yeah.
feedback on that ever?
No, nobody's ever said anything. I think just because it's so common. You know, I've watched a lot of shows too, and honestly, like half the people look very nervous on stage. Like it's like a different feeling, especially when you're almost naked, So
Yeah.
yeah, no judges have ever said anything. Like my coach has never said anything. So it's just something I know I need to work on, and like I think it's just more of like a time and experience thing.
Yeah, for sure. So you started competing in 2017 and then you were
Mhm.
self-coaching yourself for a while. Was this something you were already passionate about? Like, did you already like exercise and nutrition and like the competing lifestyle, or was it something you were just like immersing yourself into?
Yeah, so my first show was August 2017. But I started prepping for that show about 11 months prior. And, when I started looking into competing, I had been weightlifting about 3 years consistently, like every single day. Um, but I had only been on my nutrition consistently, maybe a year and a half, if that, like as far as like counting macros goes.
Mhm.
Um, and getting in the gym has definitely never been an issue for me. Like I love weightlifting. I always have. Like when school sports ended my senior year of high school, that's really what got me into weightlifting. Is I was like, all right, what now? What do I do with my time now? And I loved working out, but I didn't have any like sport to hold me accountable or like, to guide me. So me and a few friends like started going to the gym every day and I just never stopped.
Wow. So when you decided to self-coach yourself, you started 11
Mhm.
months before you actually stepped on stage. When did you realize like, okay, I'm ready to actually do this thing now?
Yeah, so I guess it was right before that 11 months. Um, so I mean, I looked into getting a coach, and at that time, like Instagram wasn't quite as big as it is now, and I didn't really know of any online coaches or like how to go about finding an online coach or if it was even worth it. And there was like a local coach in my area, and people had told me she was like very affordable, like very reasonably priced. And whenever I found out how much it was like $600 a month. And
Oh,
I've been working full time since I was 16, and
yeah.
so that was just like not, I'm just trying to pay my bills. Like that was definitely not an option. So I was like, all right, well, let me see if I can prep myself. And so I did like a little mini prep, like just by myself to see if I could get pretty low body fat. And I got to the point where, I could see like my six pack. I had like a serratus going on. I didn't really have like glute ham development, but like I knew my backside was pretty lean. So once I realized that I could get down to a pretty low body fat myself, I was like, all right, let's spend the next year building, posing. And then I did about like a 3 to 4 month prep into that show.
Oh, okay. That's awesome. And then eventually you did hire a coach, right?
Yeah. So after my third show, well, at my third show, I won the overall, and Maximum Muscle Report was interviewing me. And he was like, "Who are you working with?" Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, "Well, I've always coached myself. I've never worked with anyone." And he was like, "All right, that's great." And then, the interview ended, and he was like, "Do yourself a favor, get a coach." And I was like, "Well, I mean, I really just can't afford one." And he was like, "Hold on, let me go get my wife." And that's how I ended up with a coach. So they ended up sponsoring me and coached me for that year.
Wow. How was that
Yeah, that's pretty
experience?
cool. It was honestly like it was very difficult in the sense where I'm kind of like a control freak, and I had been coaching myself for several years, and everything that I had learned was through research and like very, like modern research, like articles that had just come out within the last year or two. And um, I wouldn't say they were like old school coaches, but they definitely have like a lot of experience under their belt. And it was just hard letting someone take over, like my body and just like let them have everything and control everything. And I mean, it ended up working out really well, but it was definitely hard to give someone that power, like after I'd had it so long.
Mhm, totally. And so did you end up experiencing a benefit from it, or do you feel like there's a benefit to having a coach now that's maybe shifted since when you first started?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I feel like everyone should have a coach. It really just came down to the financial part for me, but um yeah, having my first coach, like she definitely pointed out a lot of things I would have never even imagined. Like the very first week that we started working together, I mean, it's bikini, so I'm like, all right, I need hamstrings, I need glutes, I need shoulders. And she was like, you need upper chest. And I was like, upper chest? Like what? And she was like, yeah, that's your weakest muscle right now. And at the time I was like so confused, but after a few months, I realized, like, I started looking at stage shots and like my progress photos, and I was like, wow, she's right. Like, it almost was like caving in. And, for bikini, you want like a well rounded physique. And it was just like a huge part of my upper body that was missing. I just had no idea. And I, like, my fiance would have never guessed because, I mean, he's a competitor as well. And like my friends, nobody ever said anything. So, had I just continued coaching myself, there are definitely like certain muscle groups I would have neglected, and certain aspects of posing and presentation, really just aspects of the whole process that I would have never thought to put in, effort into.
Totally. And do you notice that, like, with your own clients as well, that there are things that they benefit from obviously having you coaching them? Like, are there certain things you notice as a coach that has maybe made their experience better as a client of yours?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could name 100 things, but you know, just one hot topic that has been coming up a lot lately, especially with my clients and even on social media with other coaches too, is reverse dieting. You know, because a lot of people have issues yo-yo dieting. They lose a bunch of weight and then they go back to their old habits and they gain even more weight back and they don't know why when, you know, their metabolism is adapted. And I feel like that's one of the biggest things that I've been able to help people with, and that they, you know, they would have don't even know what reverse dieting is, never even heard of it before, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a big deal, especially for first-time competitors who haven't heard of it,
Hmm.
like you said. And then it can even hit most seasoned competitors. And something that I do personally for my business with competitors is I help them with the mindset side of this. So really getting a better relationship with food, with their body, with their goals. And I think that in conjunction, or I should say, I know that in conjunction with a great plan from a coach, it's it's actually what's going to make them unstoppable and make them have that longevity in the sport and be able to continue to sustain successful preps, and having a successful improvement season, a successful reverse diet is what's going to lead to you actually having an even better prep, right?
Right. No, absolutely.
So, what have you learned from your experiences with having coaches as well as being a coach yourself? Like, have you noticed perspective shifts or anything like that?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Man, that's a hard question. So, I mean, really just giving someone the trust, or like trusting someone, I feel like is one of the biggest things that I've come to realize, because, you know, there's 100 different ways to get the same outcome. And especially with prepping and just fitness in general, you know, there's not one right way. And so whenever you only halfway listen to your coach, you're really not giving them, like, you're not giving them the opportunity to coach you. So that was something that I really had to like come to terms with whenever I started letting people coach me, or like, you know, having a coach. And the same thing goes for whenever I coach my own athletes, is you, if you, once you like trust them, you really have to trust them, not just like listen to only part of what they say, because it's almost like a recipe. Like they have their own recipe, and if you're missing certain ingredients, like it's not going to taste right. So
Oh, wow, I really like that. The way that you
mhm.
said that. You
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier too that you had been working full time since you were 16. Do you mind sharing why that is or what inspired that?
Yeah, it's, I mean, it really just comes down to my financial situation. Like my mom's a awesome mom. She's always been like a single mom, busted her butt working. And whenever I was in high school, like she took care of me. I had plenty of food, I had clothes, I had really everything I needed, but I didn't have like a lot of spending money. You know, if I ever wanted to go out with my friends, go to the movies, like buy anything that's unnecessary, or even just like go out to eat, that wasn't an option. So my first job ever was CC's Pizza. And I mean, that job, it was really like, it started out as a part-time job, but it ended up being a full-time job, just because I liked the grind. I liked working. I liked having a little bit of financial freedom and being able to make some of my own decisions and be independent. And then from there, you know, I worked full-time through high school. And then once I got into college, I was on my own completely, or like once I turned 18. So at that point, it turned into like an actual job.
Wow, that's awesome.
Mhm.
So, okay, so I want to get into when you did your pro show. Did you feel differently, like you yourself as an athlete, than when you were competing in the NPC?
Oh my God, yeah. It was life changing. Um, so I mean, one of the funny parts of the whole situation is I had just gotten my pro card the week prior. So I got first place at USA's. That was the last weekend of July. And my pro debut was 6 days later, the Tampa Pro.
Wow.
So yeah, so I was like super nervous going into it. Going into USA's, I I had some confidence. Like I felt like I looked good, I looked ready, and I had the confidence there. But going into my pro debut, my goal was just to not get last place. Like I saw the lineup, and I mean from the year before, I was like, okay, I can compete with these girls. But whenever I saw the lineup for the year that I was competing in, I was like, oh my gosh, be I'm going to get dominated. And they stopped placing in pro shows after 16th place, or I guess most shows. So, and there was 39 bikini girls, and I was like, I just don't want to get last call ups. Like that was my only goal. And then once I did do well, it was really like an eye opener. Like it gave me a lot more confidence in myself, and it was like, all right, I can do this. Like this can actually be my career. Like I'm going somewhere with it.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome too. And you had won first place at USA's too, not right?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. And did you do anything different to prep for that show compared to previous ones? Because you said you felt really like confident going into that.
Into USA.
Hmm.
Yeah. I don't, I mean, other than I did definitely change a lot of strategies just because that was the first show I ever had a coach for. So it was it was completely different strategically. One of the biggest things was going from flexible dieting to a meal plan, because when I coached myself, I was all about flexible dieting and having room for eating out. Like I was drinking alcohol. I mean, I went and partied the week before one of my shows, like
Wow.
without a coach. And I mean, I did well. Like I actually I got first place 3 out of 3 shows, and I mean, flexible dieting worked for me. But once I got my coach, I was going to listen to what she told me to do, and she put me on like very very, I wouldn't say like strict, but a restrictive a diet, like to the point where she was like, you can't have Greek yogurt. And for me, I was like, what, Greek yogurt? So I think that was like the biggest change to like my whole regimen, was just really, really cleaning up my diet. And I actually liked it for the better. And that's the route that I'm on still. Um, but I think I felt ready because you can research a lot for nationals. Like at an NPC show, let's say, my first show was the San Antonio Extravaganza. So I looked up NPC San Antonio Extravaganza from the year before, and I looked at the winners. But for an NPC show, like they're different every year, like so different. Like sometimes you have all super shredded, hard bodies, and then sometimes you have more like feminine, soft figures. And that's what determines who's going to win, is who shows up. But
Hmm.
whenever it comes to nationals, it goes from competing against 10 girls in your class to competing against 40 girls in your class. And the results, of course, there's going to be a trend year to year. But whenever you look at the winners last year to this year to next year, they're all very similar. So I knew the look that they were going for USA's. And I was looking up the hashtags on Instagram. I was looking at my competition. I know a lot of people don't agree with that, but it's something that's worked for me. So, when I was scoping out my competition and looking at the girls from last year, I was like, all right, I can do this. Like, you know, whether I win or not, I feel like I can get first call out. So that was my mindset going into that show.
And were you going up a lot of seasoned national competitors?
Um, yeah, I don't think there was a whole lot in my class particularly. But I know like USA's is definitely one of the bigger national shows.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of girls have this fear that if they're stepping on the national stage for the first time, then they'll be up against
Hmm.
girls who have been or who have competed at nationals so many times and they may
Hmm.
not even be considered. Did that fear ever cross your mind?
No, I don't think so at all. I've had like such an amazing experience as far as like, I wouldn't say, I guess you wouldn't say like that's not politics, but my first 3 shows, I didn't have a coach and I won my first 3 shows. So that told me, like, all right, they're not singling out people for their coaches. They're not singling out people because they've seen them before. I didn't know a single person, like not a single judge knew who I was. Nobody knew who I was, and I was able to win. So that just really like gave me a lot of hope for not only my success in the sport, but just like the fairness in judging.
I love that. No, I think that that's awesome and a great, I guess, wake up call or reminder or like nudge for
Mm-hmm.
anybody listening who is going to be stepping on a national stage come 2020 that, hey, you know
Mm-hmm.
what, like you have a chance regardless. I have people this year who I was friends with and did competitions with, and then they went and turned pro at their
Mm-hmm.
first pro show. And it's like, or I'm
Yeah.
sorry, at their first national show. And it's like, you can do
Mm-hmm.
it. Like, there's nothing that says you can't as long as you're bringing the look. And like you said, it does depend who shows up. And something you mentioned you did was actually something that a lot of people say don't do, comparing yourself to the other girls. But I want to dig into that just a little, because I imagine when you were doing it, it wasn't coming from a I'm not as good as blah 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 blah. I imagine it was probably coming from a place of strategy.
Yeah, definitely. So I figured out this worked for me my first show because the San Antonio Extravaganza, it's not a huge show, but it is like a very competitive show. And a lot of girls were using that hashtag, hashtag San Antonio Extravaganza or San Antonio Extravaganza 2017. And I was maybe, I don't know, maybe like a month out from that show. And I started looking up that hashtag and comparing myself and showing my fiance. And he was like, this probably isn't a good idea. The only competition is you. Like, you're the only person you need to worry about. But what I found was that I started looking at girls and I was like, okay, this girl looks better than me. And some people start beating themselves up about it or, really take it in a negative way. But I'm such a competitive person, it pushed me to be better. And so, I mean, I'm someone that I've never struggled too much with self-confidence. And I was actually going into my very first show. Of course, I was nervous and scared, but I felt like I looked good and I was pretty shredded, And then I saw girls that I was competing against that were even leaner than I was. And I was like, oh, I got to step it up now. And I actually started pushing harder when I started comparing myself or like looking at the other girls I was about to compete against. And the same thing goes for USA's is, I saw where they were in their preps and I looked at myself where I was in my prep and I was like, maybe I need to step it up. Maybe I need to stop slacking and, instead of doing 45 minutes of cardio, I need to actually look at the calories I'm burning and being more consistent with my cardio or whatever it might be.
I just love, there's so many reasons I love this show, but one of the reasons I love this podcast is what I'm saying is like, because there's so many
Mm-hmm.
different perspectives and I love to hear your perspective on this. And I think that it's really awesome what you're saying, because if you look at other sports, like let's say basketball, like if a basketball player was watching someone else in a skills camp or something, they might see that that person's skills are way higher than theirs have been. So they can look at that and be like, well, then I'll never be able to beat them, right? I'll never be able to be on their team, or I won't be able to do well if we ever played them. Or they can look at it
Mm-hmm.
and go, I'm going to go to the court later and I'm going to improve my skills, or I'm going to sign up for a skills camp for next month, and like they get motivated. So you can go two different ways as an athlete. I think you made a really clear point. Self-confidence hasn't been an issue. And I think that when we actually take the time, and even if you have a natural self-confidence to you, some people who
Mm-hmm.
don't, if they can prioritize building their confidence and building that belief in themselves, that's going to then reflect in their overall game, of competing,
Oh yeah, definitely.
just like it has for you. And it got you to push harder. And so, I want to go back to your pro debut. You had an injury afterwards, right? Or were you dealing with an injury at the time?
Yeah, so I mean, this has been an ongoing injury for over 2 years now. So this happened right after my very first show back in 2017. So my first show was in August. Then 2 months later, October comes around, and um, I was lifting very heavy at this point. Like, I'd been post show. I wasn't planning on competing for another year. So I was just really, really trying to push weight and grow. And I had a back day and I was rowing like very heavy. And granted, my form was probably off, or maybe I just went too heavy and my body wasn't ready for me to jump that high up in weight. But I had an awesome back day, lifted super heavy, like felt great, went home, went to bed. And then I woke up at 3 a.m. and could not move my whole body. And like, I've never, that's like when people say they like throw out their back or tweak their neck or whatever. I had no idea like what was going on. I'd never had anything close to that experience. I moved my head like an inch and I felt like it was agonizing pain. And I had to wake up my fiance. I was bawling, crying. Ended up like taking way too much like Advil and Tylenol just so I could get into the doctor. And over the last 2 years, it did heal pretty well. Like after 3 or 4 months, like I had to take several months off that first time, but then I've had like little minor flare-ups here and there. Well, I'll have to take a few weeks off. And then during USA's was by far like the worst flare-up. Like it was bad, worse than the original injury. But it was a similar situation where I just woke up in the middle of the night one night and I couldn't move. And I've done 2 MRIs. Like I've done both my back and my neck MRI. I've done probably 8 different X-rays. I've done blood work. We've done so much testing. It's unreal. And we still don't know what's the issue. But right now, like the best guess is a compressed nerve somewhere like at the very top of my neck, like the cranial nerve, which is why it didn't show up on an MRI. But we still don't really know what's going on. I'm still kind of working through that injury. But going into USA's, I did not lift for about 6 weeks. So the last 6 weeks of my prep, for 3 weeks, I was on the couch. So 3 weeks on the couch, I didn't get up. I didn't walk. I didn't do anything. I was pretty much just like, I was just stuck. And then the next 3 weeks, I pretty much only did cardio. And then I went and competed. And then a week later, went and did my pro debut.
Oh my gosh. Did you, okay, at the 6 week, okay, now I'm like, what the heck? That's crazy. 6 weeks before USA's, you're told you need to stay on the couch and not move. Did you think in your head, now I'm not going to be able to do USA's? Or did you think like, I'm still going to step on that stage?
Oh no, it was like back and forth. Like for the first 3 weeks, I was a little bit ahead in my prep. And that's something I've always valued, is being ready early, because you never know what's going to happen. And believe it or not, I've been injured through every single prep I've done. There's yet to be a prep where I'm not injured. So, after that first prep that I sprained my ankle and I was in a boot for however many weeks, like that's really what opened my eyes to the fact that no prep is perfect, whether you get the flu or someone in your family dies or you injure yourself. So I've always valued being a few weeks ahead. And because I was able to like push through that prep. But yeah, right when that injury happened, I was in so much pain. I was like, all right, I'm pulling out. I'm just going to do North Americans, or if I'm not healed by then, I'll do Miami Nationals. But I was really just back and forth, dropped my carbs a lot because I wasn't moving. And once I started getting back able to like walk again and like back on the treadmill and the Stairmaster, then I started having hope. But it was really just like, it was on a daily basis, a weekly basis, even like an hourly basis, where in the morning I'd wake up and I'm like, I'm still going to do it. And by the end of the day, I would be like, screw it. And I would eat a pizza. So it was a really, really rough time, like mentally, that last 6 weeks. But I think about the 2 week mark out was when I fully committed, paid for everything, signed up, and then just pushed through.
Wow. And now I'm glad. I bet you're glad you did.
Oh yeah. And I mean, I almost pulled out. I almost didn't do the Tampa Pro either, because I was like, I really, I've put myself pretty far behind. Like I was good enough for USA's, but I'm not going to be good enough for a pro stage. And my coach was the one that really pushed me to do it. And thank God she did, because, I placed 4th at my pro debut and got Olympia points. Like that would have never happened.
Yeah,
actually not push
that's
me.
amazing. So, and after your pro debut, you were taking the time to heal as well, but part of you felt like you had let go of your diet a little bit and rebounded slightly. So, when you got in touch with your coach, he was like, I want to lean you out right away. Do you know like why he made that decision to be like, okay, there was a small rebound, like let's get you lean now?
Yeah. So one detail just to throw in so everyone knows is this is the point where I switched coaches. So this was right around the very beginning of October or late September. But my pro debut was August 4th. So I stayed with the previous coach for I don't know how many more weeks. And at that point, I was kind of ready to try something new and see what else see what else was out there. So I found my current coach, which is James with Team Atlas,
Mm-hmm.
and I talked to him back and forth for a good while before I signed up. And once I signed up, at that point, like I knew that we were on the same page as far as pretty much everything. Because I had jumped so quickly into getting my first coach, and there was so many discrepancies with what I wanted to do or certain prep techniques. So whenever I was signing up with this coach, like we really talked a lot. And I like at that point I was like, he has 100% of my trust. Whatever he tells me to do, I'm just going to do it. I'm not even going to question it. And so when he told me he wanted to like lean me out, he didn't really give me like a reasoning, but I already knew it was because I was already, 10 pounds above my stage weight when I'm to the point where I really don't need to grow that much. Like I had enough muscle to go pro. I had enough muscle to place at a top tier pro show. There's really no reason why I ever need to be 15, 20 pounds over my stage weight. Um, so I knew I just needed to kind of get back to where I was, not like stage leanness, but I knew that I needed to be leaner before we went into our bulk because, once you start lean bulking, like you're just going to be putting on more and more body fat. The goal isn't to be 30 pounds above your stage weight. Like, especially as a pro, it just makes things so difficult and you end up losing muscle mass in the process. And it's just so much more of a stressful situation when you're way above your stage weight. So I knew that was why we needed to cut down first.
Totally. And you made a really great point, which was that you had enough muscle to do really well in the IFBB
Mm-hmm.
Pro League. And of course, even after having taken, let's say, 3 weeks completely doing nothing, then 3 weeks of only doing cardio, you still had enough muscle to place first and then go on
Mm-hmm.
and place fourth. So it doesn't make sense for you to get up more than, let's say, 15 pounds over stage weight. But do you think for
Mm-hmm.
some competitors who need to add on a lot more muscle would actually benefit from this?
Yeah, I mean, it totally depends case by case basis, of course. But yeah, I think sometimes it has to be necessary, not only just to put on the muscle mass, but a lot of women just don't have a burning metabolism. And so, and I say women specifically because we're more inclined to do, participate in diet culture where men aren't as likely to, crash diet or yo-yo diet. Not saying that
Mm-hmm.
they do, but it's definitely more of a female trend. But yeah, a lot of us don't have those burning metabolisms, and your metabolism is greatly dependent on how much you eat and how much muscle mass you have. So if you're maintaining at 1200 calories, like imagine how low your calories are going to have to get when it's time to prep. So, instead of staying at a low body fat, that's the time where I'm like, all right, you need to be in a 250 calorie surplus up until we get to where we need to be. And like with my clients specifically, like we definitely do little mini cuts or like, cut down for 4 to 6 weeks if our body fat is getting a little bit on the higher end. But yeah, sometimes I feel like it's just necessary to get you where you need to be before you go into prep.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I like how you said it's definitely case by case. So, um, a while back you had made a post, and I just find a lot of your posts really awesome. I love them in general.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Yeah, and I appreciate you making that type of content. The content you create is different, it's inspiring, and it's insightful. So, I remember you had outlined like why some people just aren't cut out for competing. And when you're coaching girls, do you ever find that the ones who start as lifestyle clients end up doing better than those who just hop into a prep without much of a background in the lifestyle as is?
Yeah, no, definitely. There's only been a couple girls that I've just let, where I'm like, all right, let's go ahead and prep. But the vast majority of my prep clients, I make them do lifestyle with me first, so I can figure out their body, and so I know for a fact that they're ready for a prep. But there's definitely been certain clients where they weren't even interested in competing, or they really just didn't ever picture themselves to be, you know, such a badass, and then they go on and they kill it, and then they become interested in prepping because that's the next step.
Yeah, definitely. Like it's almost like a more natural progression.
Yeah, and with the post, it wasn't. I wasn't trying to say a specific type of person isn't cut out for competing. The main like theme throughout these posts and also like my YouTube series is that you might not be ready, or like you're not cut out for it yet. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to say a specific type of personality or any specific person or whatever isn't cut out for competing. I'm just saying you're not cut out right now. Where you are mentally and physically right now, you should not prep.
That's a really great clarification. And yeah, I've noticed personally, like I was talking to some people in the gym about how crazy it is that there are some people who like don't go to the gym every day. It's just not part of their lifestyle. Maybe they
Hmm.
go a couple times a week, maybe they have a different form of exercise or activity, but like for me, it's like, oh, it would be so weird to just not go to the gym at least 5 or 6
Right.
days a week. Like it would just be strange. And I know that because I've established that lifestyle even before getting into competing, and then took it even more intensely when getting into competing. Now, let's say even if the stage never ever, if there was never a stage ever to step on again, I'd still be in the
Hmm.
gym 6 days a week. And I think that
Yeah.
that's like a good place to be. And kind of when you know that you're doing it for maybe better reasons or the right reasons and not necessarily just because you want to step on a stage.
Yeah. Or just lose weight.
Right, exactly. Because then it's not going to be as sustainable because what's actually going to keep you going back?
Hmm. Exactly.
So, what do you think can help someone to improve, let's say, their discipline so they can become the person they need to be more prepared to prep or even reverse diet?
One of the biggest things that I feel like can help somebody is time management, because that is probably the number one excuse that we all hear is I don't have time. Whether it's just to work out for that one day or to do cardio or to start going twice a day to the gym, is I don't have time. And the reality is that most of us do have the time, unless you are, I don't know, in nursing school, or even I have a friend that was in nursing school and prepped. But
Mm-hmm.
you know what I'm saying? Even the people that are working however many hours a week, usually you do have the time. It's just a matter of like really being smart with it and not sitting around on your phone, or even, wasting 30 minutes in bed just trying to get out of bed versus just getting up and going.
Mm-hmm. I was at a boot camp yesterday with my team, and Joe DeShulo and Ingrid Romero. So they were both talking about how important time management is. And I love
Mhm.
that you're bringing this up because there are some people who will argue that they don't have time, but then as they were saying, they make time to watch like Netflix series. And
Mhm.
while that doesn't mean you can never enjoy entertainment, it also doesn't mean that it should be as much a part of your daily life if you can't even prioritize like the exercise and the diet that you're trying really hard to commit to for a goal.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't like fully connect my answer to your original question about discipline, but it's really just about being self-aware with certain aspects of your life, like time management. So just being self-aware, being real with yourself, and just letting go of your ego and your excuses and saying, okay, I do have the time for this. I do have the energy for this. What do I need to change? Or like, actually sitting down with a pen and paper and mapping out your schedule versus just going with the flow. So just like taking those steps towards making things happen.
Oh, I love that. Yes, it's just awesome to hear you say it too. Like put the pen to paper, like change your habits, be self-aware
Mm-hmm.
enough to take the action that's necessary to actually become this person that you say you want to become, right? Like
Right.
it's not going to happen on its own, and it's certainly not going to happen following the same structure you've been following for the last 10 years.
Yeah, just expect it. They're like, oh, whatever happens, happens, or whenever I'm ready, I'll be ready. Or, right now my life is too hectic, but in however many years it's going to be better. The reality is it's not going to be better. You're going to have new responsibilities. Some people are like, well, I'm in school right now. Well, you're going to have a full-time job. It's probably going to be even more taxing than school. So it's really about just like being real with yourself in a situation.
Yes, I was just talking to a friend the other day about like relationships and how it's very similar. Like someone might say like I don't have time. Well,
Hmm.
they just don't want a relationship, or they're not ready to commit their time to developing a relationship. And that's the same thing. If you're not willing or ready to commit the time to developing a relationship with your competitor self, or the best version of yourself, or the next level version of yourself, then you never will. Because like what you just said is
Hmm.
something's always going to come up. And you even mentioned that
Right.
before, like not every prep is perfect. You could have like a tragic accident happen, you could get injured. Like you can't prepare for those things, so it's better to just like have some structure so that if they do come, you're still moving forward, right?
Right, exactly.
And obviously, we both know it's not just about discipline. And you mentioned self-awareness. So we know a lot of it like has to do with like passion and really like a drive and a deeper desire or a deeper why to actually go through the process of, let's say, getting on stage. So I'm curious to what inspires you to compete.
Yeah, so to be honest, like my very first prep, I was just doing it to do it, like to push myself to the next level. I had been lifting for 3 years. I had been on, counting macros for over a year. And my fiance had competed. I went to one of his shows and I watched him compete, and I saw a bunch of the bikini girls there. And in my mind before, like I said, it wasn't as big on social media 3 4 years ago as it is now. Like it's really just becoming more and more popular every year. But there was only maybe one girl that I followed on Instagram that was a competitor, and she looked freaking awesome. But other than that, I just had this like idea that everyone looked like a supermodel, or like everyone that stepped on stage was, pro level looking or national level looking. And then once I went to a show and I saw the girls that were competing, I was like, oh, I could do that. That's not that far from where I am. So it was really just to push myself to the next level and just to do it and see what would happen. But I never expected to compete after that one time. And I even
Mhm.
had like certain people in my life at the time were like, you could go pro if you wanted to. And in my mind, I was like, yeah, right. Um, but once I was maybe like, I don't know, 3 months into the process, like I was already hooked. And for me, it's I'm just a super competitive person by nature, and I also have like a pretty extreme personality. Like so prep just like it just like really fit in my life, and it made me more passionate about everything. Like some people prep and their life goes to smithereens, or they fall apart and
Mhm.
break down. But for me, like the longer I prepped, the stronger I felt, and like the more I felt passion with my fiance and passion with my work, and just wanted to do better like all around. So for me, it's more of how it affects my life and my emotions rather than a specific reason, I guess.
Totally. Actually, I think that that's a really great way of putting it. I like that a lot. I have a very similar experience when I'm in prep,
Mm.
especially competing as a whole. I mean, it's obviously not just like a 12-week or 16-week or, 11
Mhm.
month prep, but it is year round. And so I really like the way that you put that. I have very, like I said, I have a very similar experience. I like that about prep. It does seem to get
Mhm.
everything, like all my ducks in a row. And I think that is because of the regimen. And I think it's like, there is that desire, like if I'm showing up to improve myself every day, then it's natural for that to leak out and show up in other areas of your life.
Yeah, and the thing is I enjoy every minute of it. Like
Hmm.
I love lifting. I love cardio. You know, some people hate cardio. It's like the worst thing in the world. I love cardio. So, and I mean, not saying that I love clean food as much as I love pizza, but you know what I mean? I love every part of prep. There's not one part of, and I love posing. Oh my God, I could go on for hours about how much I love posing, but it's like every part of my day and every part of that prep I'm enjoying. Like prep is for me, like this lifestyle and this sport it just works so well with my personality and my lifestyle.
That's awesome. And originally after the Tampa Pro, because you had gotten some Olympia qualifying points, you said you were going to take time off and not even consider going back into qualifying for the Olympia until 2021. Is that still your plan?
So it's similar. So like, you know, I did really well at the Tampa Pro, which was a big show, and I knew that like I could do well at other pro shows, but kind of what we were talking about earlier, I have a lot of self-awareness. Like I'm confident. Of course I have my insecurities, but all in all, like I can look at myself in the mirror or, you know, a video of my posing on stage, and I'm able to kind of pick apart myself and see what I need to work on, and also be able to compare myself to the top 5 Olympians. And whenever I compare myself to the top 5 Olympians, I know I have a lot of work to do. And so for me, like because the Olympia is my next big goal, I don't want to compete just to compete. There's really no reason until I'm ready to qualify and to step on stage and know, okay, at least I have a pretty good chance that I could get first call up to the Olympia, you know? So right now, excuse me, right now my goal is just to like really put on as much muscle mass as I can, really like in my shoulders and my glutes. Those are, I mean, of course, those are the muscles everyone's working on, but just when I compare myself to those girls, I know I have a lot of work to do in those two areas. So I'm taking as much time as I need, and hopefully that's, you know, before the 2020 Olympia, so I could maybe qualify for 2020. But if it's not the case, then I'm just going to go for as long as I need to until I feel like I'm ready and I can compete with those top athletes.
That's awesome. And I think that even connects back to how you've always been as an athlete yourself. Like, let me look at the best at where I'm going or what I'm going to be doing or competing in, and make sure that I'm primed for that and I'm setting myself up for success, and not, like you said, not just competing to compete.
Yeah, and you know, if the Olympia wasn't as important to me as it is right now, like if I really wasn't so set on that specific goal, I love prepping and I love competing. So I probably would be, you know, within a few months of getting my metabolism up, I would probably be back in a prep just because I wanted to. But right now, like that goal is just so much more important to me than that short term pleasure.
Yes, I just love that. It's very it's a very good perspective, I think, because every
Yeah.
competitor, especially in the pro league, who wants to eventually step on the Olympia stage or the Arnold stage, they probably love competing. Like there's no doubt
Mhm.
they wouldn't have continued to compete in the pro league or in the pro circuit if they didn't love it. Um, and you're saying, well, yeah, I still love it just because I'm not trying to compete every weekend and hustle to whatever, it doesn't mean I don't love it. It just means that because I love this big goal of mine, I can set aside the actual desire to step on stage right now so that I can be my absolute best when it comes time to fulfill like the main dream and goal, like the reason why I'm doing any of this at all.
Yeah, and something that I've been able to find kind of like, I wouldn't say the silver lining, I don't know the term for it, but kind of like the way I've compromised between what I, competing and not holding off and not competing is that's kind of why I started working with my new coach, is because he's like, I mean, he's the real deal. He's very extreme and like he does not mess around. And so whenever I signed up with him, I knew it was really going to kick me into gear and like get me on top of my stuff. And like right now, this mindset that I've had during this reverse diet and this lean bulk is almost like prep. Like I'm still doing 2-a-days. I'm still 6 days a week. I'm doing fasted cardio. And then I go back later in the day. I'm posing every day. Like I'm still eating chicken and potatoes and green beans. And even though I'm gaining weight, I've been able to kind of hold that prep mindset through this off season. And that's kind of where I've been able to like really become happy with where I am and holding off and competing.
I love that because you still have that fulfillment from prep because your mindset hasn't been like, well, now that I'm on a prep, I'm not even going to commit to the lifestyle like I usually do, to the extreme
Mm-hmm.
sense of like a prep where you are posing every day or you are, holding all of those goals in mind and eating exactly as you need to be. Have you noticed since working with James that because he's at a different level of extreme than you've done in the past, that there are days where you're like, oh, I want some more freedom, or I want some, like, I want to go off plan? I don't know how to phrase this question, but have you noticed that your mindset has kind of pulled you to maybe the old habits or ways or
Mm-hmm.
desires?
Yeah. So, sorry, James, if you're listening, I'm just going to be honest here. But my whole take on having a coach is you hired the coach. I hired him. He didn't pick me, right? And the same thing goes for my clients. So for me, the fact that I'm not even considering competing for about a year, I feel like I have certain expectations of myself. And certain expectations of my lifestyle. But part of that expectations is I'm trying to enjoy life. So, I went to several music festivals just in the past couple months. Like I've gone out, I've gone drinking. Even just yesterday, I ate probably 2,000 more calories than I should have. But the difference is that when I check in with him, I'm going to be honest with him. Hey, this is what I did off the plan. Like this is where I messed up, or I made the decision to go out and have 5 tequila shots, and I know that he doesn't approve of that. He doesn't want me to do that. But at the end of the day, I know like I'm not in prep this very moment, but I'm putting a lot of effort into this whole process. And whenever I want to have fun or go off the plan, I'm going to do so. I'm just going to be honest with him and reflect on it and decide whether was that a good decision and it made me happier and it made me enjoy life, or did I just drink 5 tequila shots just for no reason and it really didn't benefit me and I didn't have that much fun. If I ever reflect on a decision and I think that it's putting me back and it didn't make me a better person at the end of the day, then I'm going to do my hardest not to do that again, make that decision again. But if it's not, then I'm okay with that.
You genuinely exemplify self-awareness. Like you actually do. And I know you said that's something that you think goes into a big part of this, but you really are demonstrating that because you do reflect on your decision making. And with your decision making, it's coming from life values, which is also important. And if enjoying life is part of one of your values, then it makes sense as to why you would make certain decisions. And I'm so glad that I asked that, because I think some athletes would be afraid to say, like, you know what, yeah, there are days where I'm 100%, but at the same time, like, if I have this expectation of myself, I'm going to uphold that. And if that expectation is to enjoy life, I'm allowed to do that. And this is something that I focus on with a lot of the girls that I work with, is have standards and expectations for yourself, not just in prep, but also when it comes time for post show, when it comes time for improvement season, when you are reverse dieting, and make sure your coach knows it. Because if you just,
Yeah.
like if you have these expectations of, well, I want to be able to have, let's say, a family dinner every week. Let's say that's one of your expectations in your improvement season. Well, if your coach doesn't know that, and then you never even communicate it to them, they're going to assume you're doing exactly what they're giving you, which isn't going to set you up for success long term. And you're going to feel maybe less great about your decision, especially if you feel like you have to like hide it, or it's naughty,
Yeah.
or it's not good, right?
Yeah. And I mean, self-awareness, I feel like, is one of my biggest strengths just as a person. But, kind of going along those lines is I never did expect myself to be perfect during an off season. If anything, I expected myself to mess up a little bit more, which maybe isn't the greatest mindset either. But yeah, I definitely I value being able to have experiences during off season that you're not able to have during prep. So if I'm having, restricting my ability to go out with friends and family or certain events or holidays year round, I'm not going to be a very happy person. I'm not going to be a motivated person whenever it comes time to prep again, because, what state of mind am I in? It's almost like you don't want to get stuck in the daily routine. Sometimes you just kind of have to like break that routine just to, I don't know, just to be happy. Like, I know that's what I need to be happy, is to get out of the routine.
Yeah, absolutely. I even remember when I interviewed Jennifer Dory, she said her off seasons are very different than her preps, and that's what actually helps her to then be so successful. And I don't know if that's still the case, but that's stuck with me, and I've
Mhm.
mentioned it in other episodes just because it's another example of how when you have like your own standards and expectations, you're going to be able to be more successful long term.
Yeah.
So I want to get away from the competing talk now, and I want to touch on a subject that I've not brought up on this show before, but that I knew you'd be a really good person to talk to about it because you just brought it up. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm so glad I'm going to be talking to Gina soon because we should talk about this. And I appreciate that you're open to talking about it too.
Yeah.
So rave culture, I am personally not familiar with it. So forgive me if my terms are off. Feel free to
Yeah.
enlighten or like break it down for, other people like me as well. Anyway, I know
Mhm.
that there's a lot of girls in the fitness community who, and guys, of course, who are but girls are really listening to this, who are very much into this culture. And I know there's a stigma around this. And when I saw your
Mhm.
post about it, like I said, I really knew I had to bring it up because I think it's important, again, to have different perspectives. So, what would you say to people who see raving as an excuse to just get high and dance around, showing off your body and all these types of things, and taking drugs?
Mhm. So I guess I'll tell you. I'll start out by kind of telling you how I got into it.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit personal, but I'm kind of an open book already, so I'm cool with it. But I was so whenever I went off to college, I really didn't have any friends. I grew up in Houston, and I went to college in Lubbock, which is about 10 hours away. And I went with one friend who was a very close friend, but she was in a sorority and I wasn't. And so she was like constantly doing her sorority stuff, and she had a lot of classes and was in a lot of hard classes. So I was pretty much alone. And that's also how I started getting into lifting as much as I am now. Is I would just spend endless hours at the gym because I had nothing else to do. And so after like a year or so, I really just started to slip into like a pretty bad depression. And at this point, I'm a sophomore in college, and it was really like I was talking about that routine: wake up early, go open the gym, because I was working at the gym at the time, but I would go open the gym, I would go to class, I would work out, I'd do homework, and then I'd go to bed. And it was just day in, day out. Never really did anything fun because I had no one to do it with. And yeah, it got to the point where I wasn't like super suicidal, but I was just really, really trending down. And I started making a couple friends, and this one friend, she was like, "Hey, why didn't you come out tonight? We're going to this EDM show. It's kind of like a rave, blah blah blah." And I was like, "All right, I'm down." So at the time, I just hated EDM, like electronic music.
I
I
was
was
gonna
like, "This
ask
just
you,
sounds
did you
like."
even like it?
No, I hated it. Like at this time, I just listened to rap, and I listen to rock and like some other genres too. But like generally, I just listen to rap. And so to me, EDM, it was like it sounds like robots. There's no melody. Like what is this noise? But it sounded like fun, and like I'm a pretty open-minded person. I was like, all right, let's go. And so we go, and like I wasn't taking any drugs. I think I had like 3 tequila shots like in a row. So I was feeling pretty good. And it just so happened that the DJ that was playing is kind of like a really good introduction to EDM. And I kind of like progressive or trap music is kind of like the California roll of sushi. Like that's what I tell people. So, if you're trying to introduce someone to sushi, just don't give them like raw fish. Like you give them a California roll, right? So luckily this DJ, like he would play like radio songs or like rap music, and then he would turn it into like an EDM song, like give it a drop. And so I had so much fun this night. Like it was like beyond belief how much fun I had this night. Like I was dancing with girls, I was dancing with guys, like everyone just has so much energy whenever you go to these events that it's just like contagious. And you can't just sit there, like stand there still and stare at the DJ because you're going to be surrounded by people jumping up and down, and they're going to turn to you and be like, "Hey man, let's go." So that night it was like it broke the routine for me, and I had been so low for so long. It just was finally like a high. Like I finally experienced like true joy in my life. And
Wow.
like it sounds ridiculous, but like this like rave culture like saved my life because I went from being like depressed and bored and not looking forward to anything to knowing that every single weekend there was another DJ that was either free or like $20 to go see, and I could go and I can have like the best time in my life. And that's like what got me to start like getting back into just like finding myself really. So
When you went to your first rave and had this amazing experience, were you sober?
no, I had taken like 3 tequila shots,
Okay,
but it was like back to back. So I had a pretty good buzz, but I wasn't like obliterately drunk or anything.
got it. Okay, and so now you started to really like it. You started to go to these different concerts or festivals
hmm
on as many weekends as you really could. You were experiencing joy,
hmm
so I imagine your depression was going away.
Yeah, and not to say that like was instantly fixed, but it was more so that it gave me hope because
Mm.
like at this point, like I was saying, I wasn't to the point where I was like attempting suicide per se, but it was something that I thought about on a regular basis. Like, do I really have anything to live for? And once I started going to these shows, like those thoughts kind of started diminishing. And whenever I was bored, I wasn't thinking like, what now? I was thinking, oh, who's the next DJ? Let me go listen to their music. Who's going to the show? Let me see if like I can get a group of people together. Like, what are we going to do before? Like my life started becoming, it was just, there was more things to think about and more things to look forward to, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's awesome. I felt when I was really depressed and I was experiencing suicidal ideations as well, and I was going through a rough time too, what I found was super helpful is just making time to do more of what I really loved and enjoyed, and also
Yeah.
discovering more things that I could love and enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So,
that's really like what it was about for me.
and you connected with this message of, oh gosh, a plur? Is it plur?
hmm
Okay.
yeah.
Oh my God. See, I'm like, I'm
So
embarrassing myself.
no, that's it. It's called PLUR. So it stands for peace, love, unity, respect. So rave culture is it's so hard to explain. Like, honestly, you just have to like bite the bullet and go to an event because it's a different sight to see. Um, but just compare it to rap culture, for example. Like, if you go to a rap concert, the vast majority of people are drunk. There's going to be fights that break out. Like, of course, people are having the time of their lives, but there's also a lot of negativity and a lot of violence and um, just just bad stuff happening. Where when you go to a rave or it's predominantly electronic music, um, there's a lot less people drinking, a lot less people drinking. There's a lot of people sober. There's a lot of people doing like other kinds of drugs and psychedelics and stuff. But the thing is, peace, love, unity, respect is kind of like our motto, and it's just about like letting people be whoever they want to be and dress however they want to dress. And it's supposed to be like a judgment-free zone. And of course, not every show is going to be like that, and there's going to be some buttholes here and there. But it's really like you don't see fights breaking out. You really don't. It's like people are just really, really nice to each other. And kind of like I was saying earlier, like if you're just standing there in the crowd, like someone next to you is bound to like grab your hand and be like, come on, man, like let's dance. Like if it's a dubstep show, they're like, let's headbang. Or if it's like a progressive show, they're like trying to get you to jump up and down. So it's people are just like bringing everyone around them up with them, not the opposite.
Do you notice that even with people who aren't on, let's say, like ecstasy?
Oh yeah, 100%. And like the vast majority of my shows that I've gone to, I've been sober. And it's because, another thing, if you compare it to just club culture or like bar, like people go to a club or a bar to get messed up. But with a rave, people go to that show for the music. So it's really just like about music bringing people together, not necessarily drugs or alcohol or something else.
I could see that. I could see that for sure. So why do you think then there is like this big, I guess, stigma or like, what's the word I'm looking for? There's this almost,
Yeah, just like
it's like,
negative stigma about the whole like culture, right?
right. And how people really do just see it as a drug, like a drug festival.
Yeah, so my whole take on it is there's always a handful of people that are going to make bad decisions and be irresponsible, and it kind of ruins it for everyone. The vast majority of people, from my experience personally, are, they are using substances in moderation to connect with their friends, to connect to the music, really just enhance the experience. But then there's a handful of people that are just want to do drugs to get messed up. There's people overdosing, people throwing up, and those are, those select few people really just set the stigma for everyone. And it's almost like steroids. There's a lot of bodybuilders that responsibly use steroids or testosterone or whatever it is. But then there's also, few people in the industry that are going to use so much that they overdose, or they have a heart attack. And that's not representative of everyone that's on steroids, but that's where the stigma comes from, is from those few people.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good analogy. I was kind of thinking like when I would go to, because I used to be into like heavier metal and then like
Mm-hmm.
hard rock and stuff. I still like hard rock a little bit, but not as much as I used to.
Mm-hmm.
Man, when I'd go to these concerts, there'd be like mosh pits, and it'd be like screamo
Mm-hmm.
music, like, and I hated
Yeah.
that. Like, I would never participate in the mosh pit because I didn't want to get punched in the face. But people
Oh my
liked
God.
that, like there were people who
Yeah.
enjoyed doing that, and so this is giving, I think a perspective of, like you said, you can go to anything, and some there's going to be different groups of people. There's going to be different people. People experience everything differently, and also they're
Mm-hmm.
motivated by different things as well. And your example of even the bodybuilding thing, like, yeah, you're totally right. People, there's so many. If then, almost like the average population, not as much anymore, but I think would look at bodybuilding before as very what's the word I'm like? It's very like shoot, what is it when something's not, it's like out of the norm. It's very
Yeah.
straight taboo, right?
Yeah.
Because they just
Hmm.
imagine people like shooting drugs in the gym bathroom.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so
No,
I
for
think
sure.
like when I know I actually was conditioned to believe that rave culture was negative. Like
Hmm.
I have a very open mind. I like to hear stories because I'm aware that, you know, we're conditioned to believe things as a form of like protection or as a way to like
Yeah.
scare us. But by the same token, like you can have negative conditioning about bodybuilding and have like a life-changing experience like the majority of us.
Mhm. Yeah. And I feel like, with that whole thing, I mean, even like the mosh pit thing that you brought up, like
Mm-hmm.
my thought about that was there's always, always, always mosh pits at raves and festivals. But when you see the mosh pit, everyone has a big smile on their face. Like people aren't
Right.
punching each other in the face. People are just pushing each other around, like jumping but laughing. And there might be one jerk in the middle that's going to start something, but that's that one person. So it's just, it sucks that there's a lot of negative connotations about everything. But for me, it's like whatever vice that you have, whether it's drinking alcohol or whether it's smoking weed or doing psychedelics, like for me, it's as long as you are responsible, have good intentions, and use it in moderation, there shouldn't be any reason for anyone to judge you unless it's affecting you or someone else negatively. So that's my whole take on
That's the disclaimer.
it. Yeah, there you go.
I think that's the fact, like, yeah, if it doesn't impact you in a negative way or others in a negative way, then like no one's gonna have a reason to say something about it at that point, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, because you're not giving them a reason to. So you got into this and it's really made a big impact on your life. Do you notice that, or I guess I should ask, like, what kind of impact does letting loose and enjoying your life outside of, you know, the busy day to day or the prep life or even just like
Mhm.
the structure, how does that impact your busy day to day when you return?
Yeah, so that's kind of like what this last like string of posts have been about for me. Because so I've mentioned him multiple times. My fiance his name's Justin. So me and Justin have been together about 4 years. And the first year that we met, we went to a rave or a festival like every other weekend. We did so much. And if we weren't going to a show, then we were hiking or we were like camping or we were just doing so much. And part of that I think was because it was a new relationship and we had that initial spark. And, you know, if he was like, hey, let's go do something, I'm like, yeah, let's go. Like, why would I say no?
Mm-hmm.
But the longer that we were together, the more we started buckling down on our goals and, we started competing a lot more. And my goals went from just prepping once to like, all right, I guess I want to compete several times every year. I want to go pro. I want to go to Olympia now. Um, and then we started focusing on our goals with our careers and really just like we got so caught up in working that we forgot to have fun. And we actually didn't go to an event for almost 3 years. So we went from going all the time that first year. And then that second year, like it just started slowly tapering down, tapering down. But then for like the next couple of years, like we didn't do anything. And so then we found ourselves this year, like we were both in a rut, him more so than I. But, I wouldn't even
Personally?
call it like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And like, I wouldn't even say it's like depression. Like, that's why I'm saying like a rut, because I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it was that far. It didn't go that far, but it was to the point where it's like, your alarm goes off, and even though you got 8 hours of sleep, like you're exhausted all day. And I wasn't really looking forward to like working with my clients, which is like a big passion of mine. And I found like my patience was diminishing. Like patience with my clients, like when they were needy or like they needed help. Like I was almost just like getting annoyed with them, and me and Justin started bickering more and more, and like we had a pretty rough couple months. And what it came down to, like when we finally sat down and like had a real talk, what it came down to was like we stopped having fun with each other. Like
Mm.
like we weren't doing anything. Like even just going out to eat, like we had nothing to talk about, you know? And or like so we started making it a more like making it more of a priority to have fun. And so that's when our friends, like we have a friend group, but they're all like in Houston and different states. But a couple of them were like, "Hey, there's a music festival. It's called Freaky Deaky. Like it's like right around Halloween. Like, hey, y'all should come." And we looked at each other and we're like, "Well, we're trying to buy a house. We're trying to save money. I just started my reverse diet." We were making all these excuses, and he's like, "No, just say screw it. Like we need to do this. Like we keep talking about doing it. Let's just do it." And so even though like it kind of went against our goals and like what we were trying to do, like it was 100% the right move, because when we came back, like because we had experienced that joy again, like we had been so low or so even just like so in the middle for so long, like once you feel that high, like that like so high, that you come back and it's like it's almost like a restart, like someone hits the refresh. And like me and Justin were more passionate with each other. And I came back and I was like, the clients that were whining, I was like, come on, let's like hop on a phone call. Like I felt more passionate, more like empathetic, and I wanted to walk my dogs more. And it's just like carried on for the last 6 weeks. Like it just has not stopped.
I love that. It's such a good
Yeah.
example of how like stepping away, giving yourself an opportunity to literally recharge is more
Hmm.
beneficial. It's like your launching pad to actually creating and receiving the goals and the results that you've been hustling for.
Hmm. Yeah. And like, yeah, now that I'm back in my routine again, I feel like more energized than ever. And like I actually want to work harder, and I actually want to push heavier in the gym, where, I was almost like not enjoying my gym sessions that much. But I came back and I had that new energy, and then I also was like I had fallen a little bit more in love with the music again. So now like I have all this new music and it hypes me up for my sets.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's just made like it just like opened our eyes, like this is what we forgot about. Like this is who we are. This is like what we really love. And like when we stepped away from it for so long, like everything just started kind of going down. And so now we just know, all right, anytime like we feel like we're getting close to a rut or we just haven't had fun, like we need to go do something.
That's awesome. Do you think that that's like how you guys, I guess like that's how you are able to maintain not just a happiness within your own self, but with each other as well?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like when we broke it down of like why we weren't as happy with each other, that was like top two things, was we just stopped having fun together. Because you know we live together, of course, and we have our puppy. Like we have a puppy, she's 8 months, but she's been a handful. And we have another dog, and all of our clients. But it's like when we were with each other, we were either working or we were taking care of the dogs or we were grocery shopping or we were lifting. Like everything had a purpose. And sometimes you get stressed out during those things. So we were always stressed out when we were with each other. And that kind of like reflects on one another. And like you bounce, that energy goes back and forth. Whether I'm stressed out and I put that negative energy towards him or vice versa, like the energy between us was always just like so down. And like once we started having fun again and going and doing stuff, like I said, it just like broke that pattern. And it's just like a
That's
reminder to have
awesome.
fun.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great reminder for all of us. Like, and have fun in the ways that you really enjoy it, regardless of, possible judgment or,
Hmm.
stigmas or whatever it is. Like, do what's actually going to make you feel happy and feel good and is beneficial to you as well as others around you. And I'm really glad that we talked about all of this. And throughout the whole episode, you've given us a lot of good insights and, advice as well. But I'd love to hear, what is your best advice for new competitors, people who haven't competed before? And then also, what is your best advice for girls who are on their road to pro?
All right. Advice for new competitors is just to really check yourself before you get too deep into prep, and make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons, and be honest with yourself. Are you just prepping because you want to lose weight and be skinny, or are you prepping for yourself? Are you really wanting to take your mindset to the next level? Or are you doing it for someone else? Are you trying to prove yourself? And, you know, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons and the passion's there, I feel like that's all you really need. You know, if you have a bad coach, you're going to find a better coach. If you don't have enough muscle mass, you're going to grow the muscle mass. So just make sure that your heart's in a good place, and, you know, the rest will work itself out. As far as girls that are on their road to pro, with that, I would just say, don't ever underestimate your posing and stage presence, because that is something that will make or break you. I've said this on my page like so many times. I've never had the best physique ever. Like I'll be backstage, and like I said, like I don't have that confidence issue. So it's not me just beating myself up when I'm backstage. I'm looking around and I'm like, all right, this girl, her conditioning's on, you know, she has the development, she has the genetics, she has her hair, makeup, and tan done, but then she goes on stage and her posing is off, like her stage presence isn't there, and I end up beating her. And I think that's something that people really underestimate whenever, you know, whether they're prepping for their first show or whether they're prepping for the Olympia. It's just put more effort into your posing and stage presence, and get a posing coach, maybe even two, you know, and take a posing lesson with one, take one with the other, and see which one was better for you, and maybe stick with that person. But yeah, I feel like it's just so undervalued, and it's something that will make or break you.
I love that advice. Thank you for sharing all of that, really. And again, for your time as well, coming on the show and talking about so much with me. I know we got into a lot of different topics.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just awesome. Yeah, no, you're amazing. And I really want people to be able to experience more of you and connect with you more. So where could they find, connect, maybe even work with you?
Yeah. So, I mean, my main platform is Instagram. It's Gina Marie, Gina Marie .ifbbpro. And on my Instagram, there's like a link to my website. There's a link to the meal prep company I work with and my CBD company, and pretty much everything is on my Instagram. So once you find that, my whole life and my life story is right there. So that's all you need.
Awesome. I love it. I'll make sure I put that in the show notes page. So to everyone listening, that's always on celestial.fit/podcast. If you're listening right away, it's going to be at the top of that page. If you're listening way down the road, it's going to be in the category section. So if you're on mobile, scroll all the way down, find Gina's name. If you're on desktop, it's right on the right-hand side. So I am so grateful for all of you who listen every single week with us. We really appreciate the feedback as well. I know the athletes love to get tagged in your stories of you listening, or get your, you know, your main takeaways too. Like, it just goes a long way, and it means a lot to me too when you guys review, when you rate it, when you subscribe. Like, it just is awesome. And I appreciate this. This show would not be what it is without the subscribers, without the listeners, without all of you in this sport, really. So thank you guys again, and thank you, Gina, for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a lot of fun, and yeah, I'm excited to see what you're going to do with this. It's really awesome.
Me too. So to everyone listening, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world while you're listening to this episode. Just make it awesome.